Hello, everyone, and welcome to the broadcast. It's going to be a coding stream today, probably, definitely a little shorter, definitely a lot shorter, but we'll make it work. Switch some things around, forgot these buttons. Okay. Before we get too much further, let's check in with the kitties. We do have Sammy over there on the shelf, Mason on the bed, and Sky up in the tree. Ember was running all over the place for a moment there. Hey there, Dorothea. Welcome. Let's put the camera on the tree there. So our goal for the day, as best we can manage, will be to get the spawner behaviors in there. So what we were working on last time was to create a behavior for an entity that would act like our current weapon spawners. This is going to be useful in other ways. This is going to have a ripple effect. Currently, weapons are kind of special things that exist as part of the inventory. The result of this is largely going to be that weapons become entities. That when we rig up something like this, it's going to be an entity that sticks to the player. Or just exists anywhere in the world. Doesn't even need to move around, but the advantage here is that it can. Because that entity can move around, we can do things like spawn on top of the entity. This creates interesting opportunities. For example, the classic lightning strike kind of weapon, which I don't know how that's going to play, but you could effectively have an entity that is sliding around, and that creates the random motion, is that you give it some kind of rapid noise-based motion, that it just kind of zips around the screen to random points. And that is what creates that random position strike. It's a bit gratuitous, but it's an example of the kind of thing that we could do. More likely, we're going to be looking at sort of rotational movement around the player. Or, more particularly for enemies, say a wave up and down of I am going to spawn the enemies based on my movement, not based on movement specific to the spawner. That's the real advantage, is that we don't have to code movement-based or time-based spawn positions when we could create a movement pattern that could be useful elsewhere. So we already have a movement pattern that orbits a target. We could do the same thing with a spawn point and have things that directly spawn in that circle around the player, and then maybe radiate out or any number of things. It also makes spawn positions something that we can incorporate as part of general behaviors. That's fiddlier, though. Hey there, Cruel. Welcome. Kitties are running all over the place. At least Ember is highly energetic right now. I wish I had a camera on that. Have a S-curved cat scratcher. And Molly is too chubby to slide under it gracefully. But she is, and it's causing it to flip over, and then she slides under that, and she is chasing a catnip-infused plush toy. I make them catnip-infused by having little sealed boxes full of catnip. You toss it in there, and you just kind of shake it up and let it stew. All of the oils and the smell will kind of seep into them. You take it out, you toss it around. It effectively kind of prolongs the catnip supply. Now, I still do occasionally just sprinkle some catnip around just to watch some of them completely lose their minds. But this way I can get the good catnip and stretch the supply. So these are behaviors to assign spawn points and the entity itself. This is what we were previously using as a world event. By making it work this way, when that entity gets a time message, it's handling the time passed, or the behavior is handling all of this. If I were to make a story game, I don't know, I favor passive storytelling. As in, any sort of like dialogue or direct events would be handled probably slower, because it's a bigger deal to take in the ramifications of those events in the world around you. Some of which don't even have to be explicitly told, they can just be shown to be present. For one, it avoids some of the kind of contrivance factor that you run into in some storytelling games, where situations have to be overly telegraphed to people or even directly presented through things like dialogue or, even worse, recordings and very strangely written journal entries where somebody just straight up lore dumps on your head. Throat's a little stuffy today. It will not clear. Ingest it, that's the word. So what we end up doing is we create these behaviors and we feed this in. Then we will slot that behavior into an entity that is largely just an empty thing. That entity doesn't go away when we get out of range. So we're going to make a basic spawner entity. We grab a copy of it. We stuff one of these behaviors in, which will be prefabricated behaviors, like spawn a blob each second kind of thing. Becomes a behavior where we can say, around the player once a second, for, it using these behaviors for it. So the blob moves straight towards the player kind of stuff. Words and things. So it's going to be very similar to one of the things we've already got. In fact, it's going to be identical. Right now, I believe we have world events, but that might be... Oh, no, okay, we have our level test here. So we're creating this world event list, where currently it is a world event entity spawn. But we're going to add in the idea of a spawner layout. Entity spawners need to have 2 collision behaviors. well, really one collision behavior. First, they get created and they don't go away when they're too far out. That is important. I think we set it on the bullet. We added this last time, proximity bound, and we also wired speed in. We had this variable, but we weren't actually changing it before. But we can tell the entity, we can set up an entity such that it moves quicker than by default. This will be important. But this is the thing that I'm talking about, player proximity bound. If this is true, if you are outside of a particular range, the entity gets removed. This is something that the entity manager does. I think. Well, it's something that something does. Let's find it. Well, we have a reference here. Have I got my sleep schedule property? Not at all. Managed to force myself to sleep at about 4:30 a.m. today. Okay, Entity Manager does this. So while it's iterating over the entities, it says, hey, if this is here, check out how close it is to the player. If it's too far away, get rid of it. For spawners, this will be false initially. Then they have collision logic in their behavior that says if they get run into by the player, or I'm sorry, if they run into the player, even though they're stationary, they will run into the player. This gets set to true, and they start operating. They start functioning. So we need to make, should be a collision message. Just verify here. Where did I put messages? Messages. I have a collision message. Who and what? For the most part, spawners don't care. If they got a collision message, they're going to start their thing. So we're going to make a spawner collision type. And a spawner collision... Actually, no, we don't need to do it that way. Spawner behavior. So, right here. It's not a time pat, it's... First we do if message is collision message. Collision message. Sif. Okay, so this is... So this is part that I don't know that we have. What can we do for that? Let's look at our current collision manager. What do we got? Cruel, have I ever had a day where I don't want to work on my project, just open it and looking at it? That's every day. Sometimes called executive dysfunction, where you want or need to do something, and you acknowledge that, like, this is something that needs to happen, but there's kind of a short in the mental flow that says, but I just can't start. This is the kind of thing that can be overridden by schedule panic, and this is part of the reason that I need to frequently what I end up having to do is get my stream scheduled in advance, because it creates that sort of schedule panic. It's like, I have a stream, it's gonna start, I need to do this stuff, and the fact that there's this deadline coming up forces it. Back in the school days, that was a factor for me, is that I could do a lot of work all at once if there was some sort of deadline. Imposed or artificial. Okay, add an entity. We're going to create the collider for it. Do we have a method for removing an entity collider? Add an entity, we get that. The collision. We don't currently have a way to disable collision once it's active. So we have some sort of collision method here. Whenever the entity updates its position, we are disabling there. Okay, we have an enable disable collision set up, but how do we get to it is the trick. Because we need to get to the collider. Set the entity here. This becomes the trick, is combining the so this is the element here. We could, in the entity, have a marker that it collides or it doesn't. And I think we might need to. That would let us add a signal that the entity's collision is enabled or disabled. Which means we wouldn't actually get any sort of collision event if that happens. So we would just need to add and remove a on collide collision change or on collides change. Could have on collision change, and it's just that the masks change, but that's not really enough. Yeah. So on collision change, we want to have two things. We want to have the ability to assert that it no longer collides at all. Hello, Leanne. Hello. Welcome. We want to be able to tell whether it collides at all and what it collides with. So if I just disable collision, that means that the shape or thing that we have collision with stops doing that. I define an entity area 2D here. Okay. That is an area 2D that has an entity. Oh, welcome, Fluff. I mean, better late than never. There's a misspelling there, Leanne, but is that meant to be what are you? As in, like, what is your avatar or something else? Burr is getting back scratches. So if we take, let's just do a quick test here. Area to very quickly dart and press the keyboard because otherwise Ember gets squirmy. Because we can add and remove the collision layer and mask, but that is still potentially going to cause collisions. This would be monitoring and monitorable. Yeah. So if collision is disabled, monitoring and monitorable will become false. Now, when it's enabled, we only set monitoring if the collision mask is non-zero. If there's nothing we're looking for, then we don't monitor. The player doesn't look for anything. Things look for the player. So like an enemy can collide with the player, but the player doesn't collide with an enemy. It's similar to bullets and enemies. The bullet runs into the enemy. The enemy doesn't run into the bullet. This creates one-way collisions. It's so that I can have logic like when an enemy hits something, it applies damage to it. Doesn't matter what that something is, but it will try to throw damage at it. The way that bullets currently work is that they have logic that says when they would take damage, potentially do other stuff. So when a bullet hits an enemy, it inflicts damage on itself. Which normally means it can take, it hits one target and then it goes away. But say I have an extra heart on it, an extra hit, that means that it could hit multiple targets, or it could strike a given target multiple times, depending on like iframes that are set up. But yeah. Okay. So our entity collider would be the thing that has that. Now, different things react to it in different ways, but an entity collider needs this right now. And the entity collider is going to watch for a signal from the entity whether its collision state changes. We can have that signal include a true or a false. Because if the collision state is set to false, it no longer collides, then we disable the collision. We remove monitoring and monitorable. For those not familiar with the broadcast, we are making a game, a Vampire Survivor style game. I have no idea they're cool. My knowledge of the actual workings of a GPU's cores are limited to that's a thing that exists and does stuff. I'm generally not operating at a level in the code where directly addressing manufacturer-specific cores would be relevant. Cores in general, in this case, actually. At most, I might, at some point, if I get crazy again, try to address, like, threading limitations. But, you know. Okay, so an entity collider. We need a... Oh. Okay, right there. Collider has enable or disable collision, which we can set on it. Okay, so we have a method for that, but that's not really what we're talking about. This will almost never be the case, or in our scenario, this will never be the case where it doesn't have a collision layer, just for practical purposes. But we may reach the point where we have entities that don't have a layer, where it doesn't matter. And that might be something that I look into doing because, like I said, things generally are looking for particular types of target. So if it cannot be hit, then it doesn't need to be monitorable. Like enemies are. But there's nothing to say that bullets will never be able to be hit. I just don't have a scenario where that would happen currently. But this might create an opportunity for further performance optimization. So if we set enable collision to false, then these two things will turn off and they stop colliding. If we set it to true, it still needs a mask and it still needs a collision layer to get the corresponding values there. We currently do this when we are messing with the cache for the entity colliders. So a collider area, when it's removed, is going to pull out its various bits here. I do eventually want to set up actual object pooling for this stuff. It's a performance optimization, but we've actually got it running good enough. And we need to keep to that mantra. It's good enough. We're going to have to look at this and how we want this to work. Because if an entity by default doesn't collide, its collision value is false. Then we want to, even if we try to enable collision, then okay, this would change inside of the collision manager, is that if it reactivates the collision, like it reuses it, when it initially sets it up, when it initializes it, we aren't going to actually enable collision. Instead, we're going to what that's doing. Initialize, we add. Where are we using that again? We only call that here. In base and in the entity collider, whenever we update the position, this is tricky. Because we don't want... Okay, right now we're using height as a factor in whether we collide or not. All right, Fluff. Folks, feel free. If you just want to lurk, that's not a problem. Some folks just like to listen to the stream. We're not really enabling or disabling collision when we're doing that. We're getting our base collision value. So the entity will have the idea of it collides or it doesn't. By default, we're going to say that it collides, and then we'll respect the rest of the mask. If it doesn't collide, then we don't care about the mask in the layer. We disable that entirely. If it does collide, when we update the position, we update its collision values. And then we can check whether it should collide or not. Okay. So right here, we are ability. This is enable collision. Not going to always be true. All right, we need to go into entity and add a collidable property here. Collidable. Here. We'll put it with collision mask. It doesn't return true by default. Delusive, both. So, in particular, though, entity, we're setting up variables for being able to turn off collision on something. So, in the only case that currently exists, this is going to be logic that says, I don't care that it's set up. Dynamic collision mask. Unfamiliar. And keep in mind, we don't know that there's an area 2D. We don't know. There's a lot of stuff we don't necessarily know about the object when we're saying it should stop colliding. For the most part, this is going to be under circumstances related to that particular entity's behaviors. One of those behaviors is going to say stop colliding. When that happens, we need to tell the entity that it doesn't collide anymore. And then the entity gets that change, and the collision management system hears that change via an event in this case, but a Godot signal in the same way. And that collision object gets updated however it needs to. For the most part, we enable or disable monitoring and monitorable according to all of their relevant variables. Seems correct. Bool. A bool. Lightable. Don't need to JSON ignore this, but I'm gonna. So collidable is tricky. We are going to set, when we set it to a value, we are going to set it to that. We're also going to trigger the invocation of the event here that it changed. But that event sends a composite. This is only one piece of collidable. Because the value that's going to get actually raised in that is going to be different. Do we actually... I think we actually want to handle it here. In that the entity knows its height, but I don't think that colliders in general actually need to know about height. I'm going to leave it that way. Me being a nuisance ember. Let's check something. Oh, okay. So dynamic collision mask. It's what I'm trying to set up here is to not change the mask, but to disable its monitoring states. I suspect that the mask being completely cleared is going to have a similar result to turning off monitoring, similar with the collision layer. But I don't want to lose that data, since that data is entity specific, and I don't really want to store that off in multiple places. Instead, we're saying do not put this thing in physics. If you're aware as to whether that is intrinsically more or less efficient, if like I disable monitorable, is that potentially destroying physics shapes on the server level and thus costing me kind of low level processing, like RID Godot RID level processing, then I wouldn't want to do that. But if that's not a consideration, but it still is doing physics checks on objects and saying, these shapes overlapped, do they care? Then I'd want to avoid that, because we're dealing with potentially thousands of things. Eventually, I would like to be able to deal with tens of thousands of things, but we're not there yet. Don't really need to pass the Boolean here. Hello, Next Level. Welcome. We're in the midst of a technical portion of the code. Will it still compile? Just wanna... Have I ever had an overheating problem because of the number of things? Not really. Biggest overheating problem I had was a problem in case layout caused by a overlarge graphics card. How am I doing? I'm doing pretty well, Next Level. Despite sleep, I'm still getting the schedule put together, and I continue to strive to have my regular schedule back, you know, Tuesday through Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday for streaming. Haven't got the video editing back, but we're getting there, and the game progress continues. Just make sure we build. Oh, these are still going super fast, but okay. That's not a problem. So right now, we're only demonstrating one weapon. I still need to change which weapon I'm using, but I don't have a better one right now. Interestingly, we can really see the deflect on the yarn balls when it happens. We have enemy damage turned off. What that means is that the enemies don't have a behavior that says, on collision, try to hurt the thing you ran into. Working 18 hours a day on the project, a lot of determination. Exactly, Next Level. Everybody's schedule is generally messed up in its own way. Sometimes not necessarily in entirely bad ways. But, you know, maybe they're just busy because there's so much good going on, or their schedule is a blank slate and they don't want it to be. There's all kinds of different ways things can be going wrong or not. But it's working for us at the moment. Again, gimmick of the game is modular weaponry. It's not a unique thing. There was a period of time where our channel did pretty much nothing but Noida. And I loved that weapon system, and to some extent I want to recreate the way we played it and the way we had modded it. And that is, you want to get out of control. We want there to be big flashy things, and I ultimately don't care if the game gets slow. the game should not freeze up. But one of the goals, the feelings that we want to recreate, is the in-joke that was minutes per frame, where the game continues to run, but the simulation has so bogged down because of the crazy stuff happening. So we can dynamically create different weapons based on properties set in them. And so we are left to right going through the effects on the weapon. So right now there's about 900 entities in the world. So blobs, bullets, explosions, those kind of things are entities, something that we're tracking, something that does a thing. There's a lot of other little bits there. There's shadows being drawn, all of that. I can probably come up with a shader that would draw the shadow. But right now it's just a direct draw call. I can probably rig it up so it's at physics server level to make it a little more efficient. But yeah, it's our goal is for this, and we can actually get it to go pretty bonkers here, and that it will still run at plural frames per second. If we can get at least frames per second at the highest levels of things that we can expect, and keep in mind, this is absurd. This is not a case that I expect to actually be in the game. This is about 3 to the 6th objects per second being generated. Yarn balls being generated. Yarn balls live for about 10 seconds. Every second they create an explosion object. This ticker for number of things is updated about every second. Exactly, next level. There are actually a lot of games that use this kind of system. Again, aforementioned Noida Bioprototype did it with a sort of sequential machine. There's a recent one that's like a cat wizard kind of thing that does it as well. Magicraft was one. There was like an adventure kind of Zelda game that we played that did similar, where you would unlock kind of modules and you would lay out a sort of flow on a hex grid to create the spells. I've seen some that do like if-else kind of structures. All kinds of cool stuff. But we have 7,600 things. That's the combination of blobs, yarn balls, and explosions right now. But those 7,600 things are also the sprite, the shadow for the sprite, all of that stuff happening. So we've got a lot going on. If the player ever reaches this, as far as our game's like, you know, quote, balance concerns, this is okay. The fact that we're going at about 3 frames a second, and we're just this rolling donut of destruction is okay. What kind of reloading system needs to be in 3D games? Are you saying reloading in terms of guns? Weaponry? What are you talking about? But answering it regardless, if we're talking weaponry, then whatever one you want. I mean, there's a YouTube channel out there that creates parodies of weapons, in everything from the way they're reloaded to the sort of ammunition, like magazine or clip that it takes. You can do whatever you want. If you're going for realism, then go for realism. If you're going for, some sort of fantasy mechanic, roll with whatever you come up with. There's a game called Scorn, which is sort of I'd almost say it's like a biopunk setting, where it is, technological dystopia, where all of the tech is derived from living things. And all the weapons are they attach to the player in a physical sense and are loaded with little bugs and whatnot. So the mechanism of reloading is specific to that setting and to the devices. But anyway. Okay, so the entity has an event now where we're going to raise change dot. Collidable changed if it has anything. I want to ask me a question. You have problem getting good ideas for games that you're making. Okay, ask away. Keep in mind, I'm not a veteran developer. I'm happy to have conversations like this, give you my own insights and thoughts on it. But this is the first game I've ever made. And this project is my first time using Godot. So the perspectives are of a veteran programmer who has played video games all their life and is now making one. So with that caveat, go ahead. Okay, so this is changing the state of Collidable. That's an interesting take, Fluff. It's my first time being alive, and I still give life advice. You're very active today, Ember. Yes. I will look at the question and be back in just a moment. Potentially a couple of minutes. We do have a Twitch ad starting soon. I would love to be able to start it early, but that's not what Twitch do. But again, be right back. And I'm back. Oh, but next level, you said that you had a question about ideas for games you're making. Okay, I'm gonna assume you meant you have trouble coming up with ideas. So let's assume that. Now, some of that is just creative endeavor, and also welcome tips. Welcome. Deployed some catnip. Let's see if we get any visibility. Switching. Okay, minor visibility. Let's zoom in here. Let me move out of the way a little bit. Okay, so we have Molly and Sherbet hanging around there. Molly has knocked over a kind of a scratcher ring that contained catnip, and she is kind of rolling in it. There are a couple of little scratchy stands that are up there in the top center that had catnip on them, and I can already see that they have already cleaned that off. Let's see, are there any other visible areas? Yes, tips. Actually, yeah, getting back to that. Sometimes it's thinking up a mechanic, like a single thing. So, I want to make a platformer. Well, start with a platformer. Running, jumping, landing on things. You can then start core loop. So every game has a core loop, a thing that you do. So original Mario Brothers, you move to the right, you jump over things, you jump on enemies, you get to the end. That's it. That's what you're doing. Every level is either facilitates that or is a variation on that. Underwater levels, you, in place of jumping, you actually kind of bob in the water, and you can't jump on enemies. So water levels kind of break the rule, the base rule, and add a caveat in there, so a little exception. You work on that and say, okay, can I get that working? Is that thing functional in the game? Doesn't matter if it's stick figures or something like that. Doesn't matter if you're in a 3D world and all of your player characters are big rectangles. You get that working. Then you say, what other things do I want to have? And look at those systems and say, how do they connect to that core loop? How and when? If you can't connect them to that core loop, they shouldn't be there. In my opinion. Yeah. Where the good comes from. Now, the dopamine hit moment, I would call it the payoff moment. What is the payoff? Because you are going to have games where it's not about, oh man, that felt good. It's can as much be about getting some sort of reaction from the player. What is that supposed to be, and is it happening? And when does it happen? You can have it be where it is meant to be intense over a period of time, and then the ending of the level is that release of tension. I made it. We're in the clear. Woo. You know? And then we start again. Dance music often does that, like club dance music kind of stuff. If you're thinking of, I'll say techno, but that shows my age because that doesn't mean what it means now. But if you're thinking like a dance club of that nature, there is the concept of the bass drop. And that is a build up to a release. So how does that build up? What is the mechanism for the release? That kind of thing. These are all considerations, but they still go into that loop. The idea of where we start and where we're going. It's important to have ideas. It is important to have a goal, but it is definitely true. If you can't deliver, if what you have created doesn't convey the idea, doesn't give you that hit that you wanted, doesn't land it, then you didn't do it. Now, that's not to say that you didn't create a good game. It's that it might not be precisely what you wanted, but consider, is it good in a different way? Because I can tell you, this game has evolved. There are moments where I've looked at it and said, this is not what I planned, but I actually like this. I feel like this is the thing that I want to pivot to. Sometimes you don't get to do that, but yeah, be open to different ideas. Just run with something. See where it takes you. Not that they're necessarily a great person, but the guy behind Five Nights at Freddy's came up with a lot of games of questionable quality and released them before they hit it. They hit the big success with Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm sure there are piles of stories like that out there. What was it? Now, I could say technically, if we want to get very, very pedantic, I did a game before this. It wasn't a game that you played, though, so that's why I don't count it. But I made single-player Pong driven by a hybrid Bayesian belief network / general neural network, but for the most part a Bayesian belief network. That would pilot where the paddle would go based on in-game data, like data that the player had access to. So it didn't know precise hitbox of the paddle. It didn't know precise velocity of the ball. It knew whether the paddle was aligned with the ball. It knew whether the ball was moving fast or slow or angled, that kind of thing. It did pretty well. Keeping in mind this was years ago, and it was running on not even a potato by today's standard. Okay, collidable is invoked. So when we get a collider, when we are setting up the events, we need to add this one. Collidable changed. So this is where we are going to update collidability. If not and collide, do a thing. If we can't collide, then we're going to try again. If we can't collide, we try again. Am I? I might have just been thinking. It's easy to lose track sometimes. Oh, well. I can also show you what I'm doing. Okay. Oh, that's not true, though. Okay. This is gonna be ugly. And category. This actually is parenthetical. This is an or. Okay, to collide, we have to be on the ground. We have to be, so first we have to be collidable. If we're not collidable, we don't collide. We have to be on the ground. We have to either have a collision mask or a category. Currently, this is always true, and I think that's okay. That is, if we exist and we have a category, then we are monitorable. Things can look for us. But we aren't looking, we can potentially not be looking for anything. That's what the player is. I don't need to store this in a variable before passing it, but for the purposes of, well, I don't necessarily like dense code. There are people that really like dense code. They like to cram as much stuff as they can in given lines. I don't. So I use a lot of spacing and new lines and whatnot, because I want to be able to very clearly go through and say this part does this and this part does this. Yes, I know there will be people that say like, oh, but I am a better boy programmer and I can look at all that at a glance. I'm fine with admitting I can't do that. Or, I'm sorry, while I'm capable of doing that, I will not. Do I sometimes get lost in my code? You have seen that happen multiple times, Cruel. I constantly get lost in my code. I could comment more. I put comments where I need to make sure that the intention of a thing is made extra clear. Because there will be times when the way that I have to do something does not easily correlate to what the code says. Like, sorcery. What the game looks like so far? Yeah, we'll show it again. I don't believe I broke anything, so... Oh, I broke something. Oh boy, what did I break? Wow. Yeah, kill it. What happened? Checking my code changes real quick here. did I do that broke a thing? So it broke down during... Okay. Classic. Right now the yarn balls are moving faster than they normally would. It was very interesting that yarn ball did a 180. Oh, okay, that was its height change at play there. The yarn balls are moving 4 times faster than default speed. That is on purpose right now. A nice little pretty pattern here. 3 to the 6 yarn balls per second that move in an S-curve while leaping through the air periodically. Then they also explode every second. Well, they create an explosion every second. But yeah, so we've got about 5,000 entities, and we've got about 6 frames per second. Pretty good, given that the number of them and what's happening with that entity. Sitting at idle, we're getting over 60 frames a second with this. Let's let them die off. See where we get back to. There is a price to going this high. I'm trying to minimize the number of nodes that I create and delete, since Godot node cleanup isn't terribly cheap. Yarn balls have a 10-second lifespan, and right now they don't go away when they leave the screen, so they have to live for their whole 10 seconds. But we let it drop back down to about 100 things, and we're back over 1,000 frames per second. But that is still not where we can be. So there is that tax of the caching that happens after a bit. That can be made more efficient, but not yet. Anywho. Okay, so in an entity collider, we are adding this, so we also need to remove this. So we detach from it. Collidable changes, we update. If position changes, we have update position. Similar with initialization, and update position needs to call update collidability. Update collidability is always going to call set on enable collision. Cruel, generally not. If I finish something in code, I generally feel pretty good about it. Now, whether I feel like that was enough, like that I'm moving fast enough, yeah, it depends on the mood, the current swing of the mood cycle. But the general mantra here is small victories. Take what you can get. Okay, an entity collider area. We are setting up all of this. I don't want to set the collision multiple times. But this really feels like a place that I should be doing update collidability. This is natural. This is natural. This is natural. This is not. We don't want to turn this on unless we have to. But, okay, for the time being, we're just going to excise this. So we know we initialize it, and then we set the position. Because this can change it. This can change how collision happens. This is parent code prior knowledge. I don't like that. Like, this does need to get set during initialization. That is true. But, okay. But we're only updating position because of height. That's it. This doesn't actually need to be there anymore. Because update position currently just updates collidability. Like every time the entity changes position, we need to make sure that it's on the ground. So in the collider, that's not, this isn't part of collision. This is update collidability. And in update collidability by default, we're basing that off the raw entity categories. whatever the entity is set to whatever the entity is set to is what's relevant. Then when we're in collider area, we don't set the monitoring here. That happens whenever we update collidability. And when we update collidability, which is a virtual here, so we are going to add that to collider area. Override. There a moment. Not or equals. I don't know if this is ultimately going to become a problem, but okay, this should happen, is that we I'm turning this off just in case. When we enable collision, we're going to set this based on always the entity. Always based on the entity. We don't care about the area there. Okay, let's go find our blob here. Just debug properties off of it. Make sure that we still get collisions. Guys all hopped up on catnip, sadly off camera. Okay, we still do have collisions. The explosions are hitting things. Yarn balls are hitting things. Okay. The fact that the yarn balls can hit things and not hit things means that the height factor is working. Alright, let's get a commit of that in. Okay. Now, we have collision in there. Now we need a spawner collider, which is a area collider, which is a rectangle area collider. So it would extend rectangle. And we're going to fix this to a constant, is what's going to happen. no, it could just be a rectangle. It's a collider rectangle. It's that our spawner behavior has that logic to it. Yeah, it's just a collider rectangle. Okay, saves us that. Then that means our spawner behavior is our next target here. Entity. Okay, so this is the thing that collided. This is the thing receiving the message. Wow. Layer proximity bound is equal to true. Proximity. Proximity. Hey, Lunar. Did I add the giant worm boss that swallows you whole as a bonus stage yet? There are a lot of games that do that as like hidden stages. Way back, there was a weird little NES game called Kid Nicky. I think that's what the title was. I know that was the protagonist, and I think it was named after the protagonist. But there was a particular spot, like a platform that you could land on, that would be a giant fish once you got near it. And if you jumped just right, you could touch its mouth and you would go inside it. Bonk's Adventure. Bonk being the attempt at a mascot of the TurboGrafx console. I think it got ported to other things ultimately, but has a sequence where you go through a dinosaur, like all the way through. That was not a bonus level. Okay, so once we've done that, the collidability will go away. We aren't removing the collider when this happens. We're not triggering the removal of the collider because it could be turned back on. So we're going to have a... Oh, wow. Good guess, game. Well, IDE. Is spawned. And it's a time passed message. equals time past delta as a float. We'll use a float because pretty much everything in Godot is a float, but one of these times I will remember to change this. C# side of Godot's delta that gets passed into process is a double. I could change this so that time passed is a float, so I don't have to deal with constant conversions to support all of the Godot back into Godot APIs which need floats. Yeah. Thought I had a frequency. Okay, so we duplicate the entity. So this is, again, specific to the intent of the game, but if you don't want players to kill other players, then don't let players kill other players. Like, you can just straight up prevent that. Alright, let's see what I'm doing in our world event entity spawn here to make sure. Okay, we call build with extra behaviors and then set its position. Spawn point. Get a spawn position, then we do add the entity. That is correct, Frost. If the goal is to prevent a player from just leaving, there's nothing you can do to stop that. They can do a forced close, they can kill the process, they can kill their network connection. Any number of things. You can't stop the player from leaving. If there is let's say a meta server level, so let's say you have an account, then you can punish the player for leaving. So the classic kind of abandoned match penalty kind of thing. You know, you've left a match in progress this many times, so you're in the naughty queue now. suffer, any number of things to discourage it, but you can't stop it. Again, so if you don't want players to kill other players because that might make a player leave in frustration, then don't let it happen. You control the entire simulation. If the goal is to prevent them from leaving, you can't. The goal is to punish them for leaving, then you need to have a way to identify that player and then to apply a penalty subsequently. If you meant in a competitive setting, then you need to have a way to identify the player and apply a penalty after of some kind. All kinds of different ways to do that. Drop their rank, again, put them in the naughty queue, any number of things. Okay, so now we have an entity that spawns entities. We can just force the existence of one of these, and that's probably what we're going to do to begin with. Just to test it. Those are types of entity. We are going to get our... We have this, which gives us the basic structure of our world event, which is the same as our spawner object, or a spawner entity's behavior. So we're going to say spawn one of these. That's true, Frost. That's true. Welcome. Welcome. I didn't welcome you. We are working on our game. I say it's Vampire Survivors-like, but as we've gone along, on top of the fact that the core gimmick is going to be that weaponry is entirely modular. So weapons will have simple behaviors to start with, but everything about them is essentially a module that can be slid around after that default behavior. We are now to the point where effectively there are going to be initially fixed stages with known spawn points in them. I may eventually pivot to a procedural system, but for the time being, fixed spawn points. Akin to a brawler or a shoot-'em-up. That is, at this point in the level, this kind of enemy appears with these kind of patterns, kind of stuff. Yes. What's your problem, Mason? Mason chirping at me. So, I'm leaning over because he's to the right of my chair. Mason was kind of a solitary cat, but he has progressively learned that he really likes particular types of scratches, and he is progressively learning ways to request them. So for a while, whenever I would take a break, he would jump down from the bed and run up to intercept me on my way back and demand a little attention. Then he started to get vocal. He's still a very quiet cat. He's got kind of a meep kind of voice. And he's gotten increasingly vocal. Now, if he wants attention, he will run up to the back of my chair and he'll reach up and claw at the back of my bicep. Let me know that he wants attention. And he'll meep at me. Okay, so don't think I've shown it to you. This is the current progress state. Player character appears. We have our procedural map with placeholder tiles at the moment. These aren't even placeholder tiles, they're just, look, I can make tiles. These maps are designed in bitmap form. You tell it which tile sets and match a color to that tile set. So, you know, I think I say that things that are absolute green result in the gray tiles, kind of stuff. The game loads that bitmap up, translates that into specific parts of the tile sheet, and creates the tile sheet. Again, work in progress, but weapon modularity. We have the yarn ball and we have the explosion. I can say 3 yarn balls a second, quick little 3-shot burst. I can say 3 yarn balls in a fan. Yarn balls by default target a random enemy. So the center yarn ball is aiming at one of these little blobby guys when it is emitted. When it creates the fan, 2 at 45-degree arcs are created along with it. You can do 3 at a time in a fan. It doesn't really matter that we do it this way. If I switch the pattern, there are some spawn patterns where that can matter. And I can show you. This is a gate placeholder icon. This is the icon for the homing mouse. The wind-up mouse is a homing projectile, but this is a behavior that definitely wouldn't exist because it's just doing a gate test. This gate says you must wait 3 seconds before we proceed. So it will fire in bursts of 3, but after 3 seconds, that each one of those projectiles will split into 3. So we have a 1, 2, 3 here, going down 3 seconds. We see the extra 3 split off from it. We can do it the other way around, where we have a fan of 3, and after 3 seconds, we get this little burst of 3. So we can have a lot of different behaviors here. These split of 3, for this to appear, it would be fantastically uncommon by itself. Any game of this nature with modular weaponry, any of your survivor-style games, multiplying projectiles is one of the most powerful things you can add to the game. Like, if you are presented with the option of add more projectiles, that is almost universally a good choice, if not the best choice. So now we're emitting 3 to the 6 projectiles per second. So they come out in this big fountain. I want to come up with some better logic for fan into fan into fan, but like I said, it's unlikely that they would actually fan that frequently all at once. There would probably be some sort of delay gate before it fired. Whether that is a hard gate that doesn't let the flow of the weapon continue like this one, or if it was a this only takes effect after 1 second. Most likely they would be hard delay gates, like you have to go through this one before you can get to the next one, period. Part of our goal is to have lots of objects, even if it slows us down. Back in the day when we played Noita, there was it was kind of a community joke, and that was minutes per frame. So right now we're getting 8 frames a second. That is plural frames per second. eventually, in playing the game Noida, our goal was to create the most absurd explosion we could that would cause the biggest damage possible, or that we could get. This was with a layer of custom mod that we created to facilitate that. So some extra performance improvements, little kind of tweaks to make it more likely that the game wouldn't crash. I think our record was something like multiple quadrillion damage, and it took like 5 minutes per frame to play out. Like, we could see each stage of the damage number popping into existence and expanding in size to show itself. So we want to get out of control. So the system is being built to allow for lots of enemies, but also to try to maintain again, multiple frames per second where you can still move. The physics simulation happens at a fixed 30 frames per second. I'm sorry. The simulation runs at a slice of time equal to a 30th of a frame, or of a second, even if that segment took longer to calculate. In theory, that could mean that there is the possibility of it seeming to speed up a little bit after this, but that is still technically infinitesimal. The frame tick of Godot is very fast, barring this kind of situation. It does allow us to do some fun stuff. So this will make it orbit around the player. The actual orbit is very influenced by the speed of the projectiles. But orbital movement is a very strong force. So we're going to see the projectiles stop. I think it's about 2 squares out-ish. That it's going to hard pull them. But all of these different movements are separate forces. This orbital motion is its own thing that is applied to the projectile separate of everything else. They can be influenced by other forces, as in, there's nothing stopping a behavior from looking at the existing force and messing with it. But what's happening is that we go through our list of behaviors from left to right, and we build up movement. Hey there, James, welcome. So the yarn ball moves at 96 speed units. That's about 1 square per second. Everything that moves, every type of movement, will consume a slice. So if I have 2 different types of movement, each of those will consume 1 slice of movement. And that slice is a proportional amount. So if there are 2 slices, each of them gets half of the movement. The more movements you add, the less each one of them influences it. Orbital movement multiplies it. Technically, this speeds it up. But the nature of it is such that it gets this pull in. So we have this giant cylinder of death here. The only thing that allows the blobs to approach is the fact that the yarn balls bounce. And if a yarn ball is in the air, it can't hit something. We don't have the proper collision set up for the yarn ball. What should happen is that there's a little kind of mini shockwave when the yarn ball hits the ground, reflecting that its collision space is actually very big when it hits the ground. Now, these are next weapon effects. So, again, an element of Noida that was really important was you could have multiple projectiles in a chain, and the way that you change them together mattered. So I could have one that hits, and on impact it emits a different one, and on that one drops multiple projectiles of this type, and you fit them all in the same line. we're not going to fit them in the same line here. If I put this one here, it says upon collision, and again, yarn ball's not a great one to do this because it needs to hit twice to get it on collision. The first time it hits, it'll bounce off. The second time, it would cause the explosion. But a better example is this one. Every second, a yarn ball emits the next weapon. The next weapon is the explosion. Currently, the explosion is going off at our feet. But if I do this, this weapon is consumed and becomes part of this weapon. So now, as the system catches up here, all of the new yarn balls will start to explode. We're going to see a little bit of the color form in the center, and it's going to start to radiate out until we get the kind of a skirt of explosions. And there they are. There's nothing stopping you from daisy chaining the whole thing. And we have tested that, where one projectile emits another projectile, which emits another projectile. I believe we had it where it was the homing mouse on impact emits 3 yarn balls, which emit explosions every second. Or, a yarn ball emits an explosion on impact, and that explosion emits a homing mouse kind of stuff. This is the kind of wild that we want to get, and then it will be a matter of tuning encounters in similar to encourage you to build for calamity cases, to try to hit as hard as possible. That is our core loop. We're not expecting the player to get to this, but we're going to supply a system that makes it possible that it could happen. And if it does, hooray, because it's really cool to get out overpowered. But you won't necessarily always get that, But even this, where we're firing 9 projectiles at a time, causing a spiral and causing these explosions, is still really powerful. It's going to take a moment for these to fade out, but they will shortly. Shortly in that it takes about 10 seconds for a yarn ball to go away, and keeping in mind that at 2 frames per second, 10 seconds is actually kind of slow. Because those 2 frames per second are... The slowdown is going to limit it. Oh wow, we had a flicker there. The most important thing in a story game is the story. It should feel believable and coherent. Doesn't matter what the story is, it should be something that is internally consistent and flows through it. The original Mario Brothers game has a story. It is paper thin, but it carries through. But this is where we're going. We have spent a huge amount of time on optimization leading up to this. I know that premature optimization is a danger surface, but we know our targets. Not our precise targets, but we know our goal. And we need to be able to hit that goal with the system that we've got before we proceed. Every time we add something, we adjust our goal. Is it okay that our frames dropped in exchange for this? Because we want lots of stuff on screen. We want lots and lots of stuff. We want flashy explosions and lots of different weapons going off and lots of enemies. But fun thing, even health bars are modular. we aren't using a health number. It's not like you have, 75 HP and this damage, this particular... Sorry. It's not that, like, a yarn ball does 9 damage, and if your hit points reach 0, you're done. It's, I have currently, across the top, you saw little cylinder things, little blue cylinders. Those are like hearts. I call them hearts in the engine. If you take a hit, the damage flows through those hearts. In the background, there is a damage number. In general, that is 1 damage equals 1 heart, but there is no requirement for that. I might have a heart that takes 3 damage. Ideally, it will reflect that visually in some way. So what that allows us to do is effectively a Binding of Isaac kind of health thing. So I might have regular hearts. I might have hearts that if I lose it, it damages everything. I might have hearts that go away forever. I might have hearts that empty. I might have hearts that, temporarily have armor, that kind of thing. Additionally, there are hearts that have function. For example, there is a bounce heart. If a bounce heart gets consumed, it changes the direction, it reflects the direction of the holder. That's a good way to put it, Frost. I agree that as long as you know what good enough is, then you can proceed. That it's only, I think, over optimization if you don't understand what good enough is. Good enough might be as good as I can possibly make it, if that's what you want. But if your goal is not as good as absolutely possible in every way, then, maybe choose a goalpost. I got this far. Oh, that's good enough for now. Like I mentioned, we've done a lot. We started this with only Godot, so all in GD script, all in Godot nodes. And we have proceeded through multiple iterations that we may revisit. There was a period where all of our collision logic was handled in a GPU compute shader. Yep. Does it meet requirements? And there's nothing that says the requirements can't change, but acknowledge, yeah, that's good. That, it met requirements. It was in time, and it hit the number that we needed to. I mean, given the state of some games that get released, I feel like even that seems to be too high of a bar for some folks, but, here we are. Does it meet requirements? No, but we're out of time. Ship it. Fix it in post. Okay, so we have the idea of a spawner now. Yes, Cyberpunk 2077 is an excellent example of it was underbaked and they threw it out the door. In a different way, No Man's Sky is another example of that. I think it reflects on the development shop / publisher, whichever one was responsible for it, whether they go back and they make good on their promises. Like, we said that this was going to be a good game. It wasn't. We're going to make it a good game. Bear with us. Deal. Good deal. I'll take it. Well, thank you, Frostbite. Thank you. I do enjoy that. I enjoy that kind of game. It's not quite the same. I encountered a game called Ball X Pit recently. They might just pronounce it Ball Pit, but the text is Ball X Pit. Which is I'm going to call it a Survivor's Breakout combo. As in, you fire balls at the far side of the screen and try to knock out the enemies, which are in brick form. I think that's cool. I think exploring that kind of thing is cool. I really hope Monster Hunter Wilds fixes the performance stuff. I really enjoy Monster Hunter Wilds. I know there are folks that feel like it's been, simplified as far as combat, but I feel like the wound combat makes the fights more satisfying. I feel like the focus mode made the control of the player far more intuitive and feel good. I feel like the open worlds are cooler, and I feel like the representation of the Monster Hunter world feels like it makes more sense. Like, Wilds didn't do a good job of conveying the guild handler hunter dynamic. Wilds does a much better job of that. Yep. Helldivers is up to that right now too. Their last few updates have increasingly hurt performance of the game. And at this point, they have pretty much said, we are heads down fixing performance problems. Like, these are big issues, they're low-level issues. We've got to work on this. And since that's presented as the biggest problem that the game has from the community, I think it's laudable that they're doing that. I feel like the pundits surrounding the game need to shut up in that regard. Ooh. Survivor's Tower Defense. Like, I've seen a lot of roguelike tower defense games. But a Survivor-style one could be neat. I think I've seen at least one. There was one where it was like, you built out like radially from a central tower, and you would be given, various tower selections and upgrades and whatnot. But I feel like Survivors and tower defense are a real solid match. Like, that's rich earth to plant in. And I think playing with fundamentals of a genre is also really good. I complain about it a lot, but the quote Souls-like genre has issues as far as what constitutes Souls-like. Better definition of that would be fantastic, but setting that aside, there are a lot of like particular core expectations that happen. So there's always the like, if you die, you drop your XP. That's handled relatively consistently across this broad genre. but there are things like there's stamina, there's dodge rolling, there's, you know, a magic point meter that you use for interesting moves. There's a parry and critical hit mechanic. Games that look at that and say, like, which parts of these do we really need? Which parts of these do I like and not like? Which parts would I remove? And I think it's always nice to see people play with that kind of expectation. Ooh. That sounds like it might be a cool gimmick there, Frost. Be interesting to see what you come up with. Okay, so we have a system in place that if we give this behavior to an entity, then as soon as the collision happens with that entity, this behavior will catch that collision and start a spawning process. Now, we currently don't have the concept of it will only spawn this many, but it will create an entity with these behaviors every unit of time. Another advantage that this creates for us, since it's an entity, is that we can have that entity be destructible. That happens later, though, because that's a whole new wrinkle. Right now, we're saying when the first collision happens, it stops colliding. But if we want it to be a destructible spawner, so your gauntlet spawner. If you're not familiar with Gauntlet, I'm old. You know, you can get rid of it. But to do that, a new collider that is relevant to the size of the spawner, that aligns with the size of the spawner, and can be hit by bullets, needs to come into existence. And that's not something we can do right now. It's not something that's impossible, it's just not something that exists right now. The ability to change the collider of an object. So that is probably going to be part of spawner behavior, is a secondary collider. And then Collision Manager needs a way of saying, like, okay, this entity is getting a new collider. Remove the old one, add a new one. So we already have all of the pieces in place to do that, where we have an on entity removed. If we can trigger the removal of the entity from the collision manager, and then we can add it back in if we create an exposed method of add an entity. So we already have on entity added, which is a message emitted from the entity manager. If we, instead of doing all of this here, we have an add entity. Yeah. My favorite is still those memes that are like, what's the oldest game controller you ever had? And they start with, like, a wave bird or something like that. was another one recently. I believe it was something like Robin Williams has been dead for 10 years or something like that. Oh, but yeah. Okay, so what we haven't done yet. The next things that we need logic for placing the spawners on the map. This is something that's going to need some fiddly logic, because we want the spawners to be able to line up with world space. So if I want it to be like a door on a wall that opens and the enemies come out, then I need to be able to precisely place that door so that it fits on the right space on the grid. If it's supposed to be like a manhole cover, then it needs to be in the right spot on the street. This is doable, but we need the right logic for it. We need to be able to say it goes on this world map square in this way. So like the top of the square or the bottom of the square, the center of the square. Since our world map is a tile map layer, we have access to that info. But that'll have to be next time, because as I mentioned on the Discord, shameless plug, I have a Discord. You can find it on my LinkTree that is in my video descriptions and in my bio on Twitch. It's something has come up. So we will pick up next time, barring anything. Well, ideally that will be tomorrow starting at 1 Central, but US Central, but that may be subject to change. I gotta check on stuff as per usual. That's the goal, though, is again, I want to get back to our Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday, Sunday at 1 p.m. US Central. Yeah, Robin Williams was a fantastic actor, and I loved his serious roles. It was amazing seeing him in What Dreams May Come, and I think it was like 12-Hour Photo or something like that, where he was the villain. Good stuff like that. Shows you their range. But anyway, we're going to wrap up here for today. I hope you all had a good time watching with us tonight. If you like what you saw and would like to see more, remember to like, follow, subscribe, comment. All of that stuff does help the channel grow. And if you'd like to consider financially supporting the channel, you can do so through platform-specific means like memberships on YouTube, subscriptions on Twitch, that sort of stuff, as well as off-platform means that can be found through the aforementioned LinkTree. We do have custom emotes and the like, and if I get my act together, we will get back to those YouTube members first videos. But with all that said, folks, I do hope the rest of your day is good, and I'll see you next time.